Welcome you to this listening session at this community summit, and thank you all just for being here and being part of our community. You've been told a few times today to turn your ringer off, so at this point, keep your ringer off, I guess, and remember that the clapping is the universal preference there. As far as other accommodations, there's still a quiet room across from the main room. You've probably seen it by now, and that's really about it, pretty much. I want to point out that our original moderator, Eric, had to take off, but lucky for us, we've got an even better moderator. Monica Toledo is here. She is our Director of Consulting and Counseling at Awesome, and she knows the subject backwards and forwards as well. I also want to thank all of our sponsors for helping us out today, but especially want to shout out MICC for their great support as our platinum sponsor. Now, please help me welcome Monica Toledo. Come on, Monica.
Hello. I am not Eric Bringenberg. I am the Director of Counseling and Consulting Services at the Autism Society of Minnesota. I've been in that role in one form or another for about 8 years. And while I am familiar with this information, we're going to go through Eric's information, and the main point of this session today is to get feedback from the community regarding guardianship, and we're going to have some questions at the end. Actually, most of this is going to be questions. I will be going over some basic information about guardianship, and then we'll get to the question section. We have a couple of folks who are going to be listening in on this community session from different organizations, such as the Autism Advocacy and Law Center, the Minnesota Disability Center, and there's at least the Regional Legal Services Center. So some community folks who are interested in knowing what is working, what isn't working, and what folks would like to see happen with guardianship. So I am going to sit because my cable does not let me go anywhere. So I'm going to be right over here. If you do have any questions or would like clarification, please let me know. All right. So the first thing is, what is guardianship? I'll take a quick poll in the room. Are folks familiar with guardianship? Moderately? Okay, you got some half and half. Guardian is someone who is appointed. It's a person or an institution that is appointed by the court to manage the affairs of another individual. Each state has different laws that govern guardianship. And so this information is primarily going to be related to Minnesota guardianship. Without the legal process of guardianship, all individuals are legal independent adults starting at age 18. So that is something that automatically happens. If you would like to do something different like guardianship, you have to actually engage in that process. There are two main types of guardianship. Guardianship of the person and like their immediate possessions is typically what we know as guardianship. The other form is for assets, finances, and monetary monetary supports. And that is called conservatorship. In Minnesota, when someone is both the guardian and the conservator, it's called a plenary or a full guardianship. You can also have limited guardianship, which we will talk about in just a minute. And limited guardianship just means that there are specific roles that the guardian has to fulfill instead of all of the roles. And again, we'll get that in just a second. So there are certain rights that an individual retains, even if they are under guardianship, and that includes the right to marry, the right to vote, drive, be employed, the right to oh, I'm gonna skip over to the next one. It also includes the right to live where you want to live and be able to associate with the people that you want to associate. So those are pieces that are retained by the person under guardianship and now are separate from what a guardian can control. In Minnesota, guardians have 9 designated roles and powers. The first one is to have custody and determine the place of abode of the person under guardianship. So where the person lives. The second is to provide for the care, comfort, and maintenance needs of the person under guardianship. Third, to take responsible care of the personal property of the person under guardianship. 4, to give or withhold consent for necessary medical care and treatment. Then 5, to make or withhold approval of contracts for the person under guardianship. 6, to exercise supervisory authority over the person under guardianship. 7, to apply for government benefits on behalf of the person under guardianship. 8, to be able to open an ABLE account for the person under guardianship. And 9, to institute and represent the person under guardianship in civil litigation. So those are the different powers that a judge could grant a guardian. And those would be the responsibilities that they have in terms of caring for the person under guardianship. Why don't we actually switch over to the questions about this specific topic? And again, because this is a community, this is a listening session. The 2 questions that we will be going over is, which powers of guardianship do you see as potentially being most useful or needed? And which powers of guardianship do you see as being potentially least useful or needed? And if I can do one of 2 things, I can leave the questions up, or I can scroll back and leave the actual rights up. Does
I have a question with regard to guardianship. Is there a way or a process for removing a guardian when the individual feels that the guardian is no longer needed?
Yes, there is a process of restitution of capacity, and we will get to that a little bit later. But does anyone have would you guys like to see the list of roles? Okay. I don't know how to make 2 slides show up here at the same time. So we have 1 through 4, and the next one has 5 to 9. Of these, which do you guys feel is the most important or the most impactful, meaningful? You guys are welcome to just give your answers. 5 through 9. Yep. So this would be contracts, supervision, applying for government benefits, opening ABLE accounts. Do folks know what ABLE accounts are?
Mm-hmm.
All right. ABLE accounts are a form of supplemental trust. it's an account where you can place money that is used for the benefit of the disabled person, but that it does not count towards their assets. I'm not an expert on that one. That's just a very basic understanding of what an able account is. I'm confident that you would be much better served by asking a financial planner or a lawyer more about able accounts. And then the last one is representing guardianship, representing the person in civil litigation. Do you guys have any feelings about which ones feel more important or feel less important?
Maybe the litigation and the medical, the important one.
Okay,
They were back in 1 through 4.
The second one is pretty foundational, but also pretty important.
the care, comfort, and maintenance needs. One or two?
One and two.
Two is the main. So number one, determining where they're gonna live. And two, providing the care and comfort. That is what you guys feel is the most important aspects of guardianship.
I think they're all important, but I suspect that those are the ones that we're most interested in the moment. Would that be reasonable? They're all important. 1 and 2.
So the next question is, which ones are least important? Which of these powers do you guys feel are the extras?
Number 7.
Apply for government benefits. Okay.
No.
Represent the person under civil litigation. And I can scroll back over to the first one. Yes.
How would number 9 work if you're not the person? So like, cause, okay, so she told me that that means like in court. So like, if you saw something, how would somebody be able to represent you, but not be you?
Can I give a possible example of that?
Sure, because I don't actually know.
If you're in a group home or something and they have neglected you, your guardian could file a civil suit for neglect or mistreatment or maltreatment
On your behalf.
on your behalf.
Well, they can do that if you're not a guardian. So like if you don't have a guardian, but like, okay, so like you saw something happen, like they want you to do like as a witness or something. How can somebody else represent you if they didn't see that? They can.
I don't know if that is something that is covered under guardianship. That might be something that you would discuss with the court as an accommodation. But this would be,
So it doesn't mean always, it just means they can.
And this
Yes.
is just for civil suits, not criminal.
Right,
So
and they can take a witness statement with just you and the lawyer recorded. And then put it in, but
so
the
they can,
guardian would accompany them.
they can advocate for what they feel might be the best option for you to work with the courts.
But 7, you can do anyway without guardianship.
Yes. So 7, anyone can appoint a representative and have them be the person that is in charge of applying. The difference is when you are the guardian, it is actually your job to ensure that that person has the benefits in place. So if a guardian doesn't fill out the paperwork and the person loses their social security, that is a failure of the guardian to meet their obligations. Or a problem with the government and something got misplaced and it has to be rectified, but, the intent here is you are then responsible for ensuring that they have access to the services that they might need. Awesome. The next set of questions is going to be about the Bill of Rights of individuals under guardianship. So the Minnesota, it's the court system. They put out a big book that you can request from the court system that has all of the responsibilities, rights, the process for getting guardianship. And in that book is a Bill of Rights for individuals under guardianship. And the rights of the person who is under care include the right to receive timely and appropriate health care and treatment, the right to exercise control of all aspects of life not delegated specifically by the court to the guardian, to petition the court to modify or terminate guardianship. So we will be talking about that in just a second, Larry. Personal privacy, the right to communication and visitation with other persons of their choice. Individuals under guardianship reserve the right to marry and procreate, so to have children, to be represented by an attorney in any proceedings, and individuals under guardianship retain the right to vote unless it is specifically listed as restricted by a judge. So this is the Vulnerable Persons Bill of Rights. And the questions for this one. Is there anything you feel is missing? Should there be other protections for individuals? Yes.
Like, I don't know, something about like having an opinion for doctor's appointments and stuff like that you still like have the right for your opinion to be considered, even if it's not the final say, but
Okay.
something like that.
So something similar to
Right, pick your own doctor.
a joint decision making.
Yeah, something like that, where like your opinion still matters, even though the other person might be the one that gets to make the final.
Instead of a doctor like looking at the other person and only talking to them.
Yeah, that
Happens a lot.
is definitely not a best practice. Many individuals who have guardians are fully capable of communicating on their own, even though they might need someone to sign forms with them. And they might go to that person to help make decisions or to help understand the options. But yeah, folks should be interacting with the patient and with the person. And that is a really good point that might not fit exactly into the questions we're asking, but we often do healthcare training for other providers, and that is a point that I will make sure gets passed along.
That's why people go down.
But from this list,
Well, I thought it said something.
is there anything else that you guys feel would be an important protection?
It should be something on mental health.
Okay,
Oh,
can you expand on that a little bit more?
There should be more, so let's say the guardian should have more say over a person's mental health. So if the person that they're the guardianship with, if they can't determine what their mental health state is, the guardianship if they are I'm trying to say, good person, should have authority over the person, the guardian, over their mental state.
Okay, so you're saying,
Mental care or
Mental care.
mental?
Yeah.
Mental care,
Mhm.
top line.
so we do have the healthcare, but there are many folks who don't always consider mental health as part of healthcare. It might be interesting to add something specific to mental health. Okay,
Would there be a possibility of including something, the right to refuse medical care? Such as a DNR?
okay,
Do not necessitate.
that is an excellent idea.
Even though the guardian may not want one.
Mhm.
The patient should have the right.
To make, yeah. And again, it kind of goes to the other comment of having your opinion be respected. If you're the person who is under guardianship. The one that I have seen come up in other states is the right to gender affirming care. The right to be recognized by the name and pronouns. And the right to sexual respect.
Not if they're very appropriate.
No,
Not necessarily.
because like say the guardian keeps telling people that you're a boy, but you're a girl. So the guardian doesn't get to choose that.
So that is one that I have seen come up in other states
Really.
that I don't see represented here. Anything else that folks would like to see on?
Does,
And-
does personal privacy like include like, so like somebody else mentioned mental health, so like if you had a guardian, like, would part of privacy be like them not automatically sharing like notes and stuff?
Potentially, I've seen it more where a person under guardianship, for example, has a computer. And their guardian chooses to track all and monitor all activity on that computer. And it is very possible that the guardian and the ward might have different opinions about what is appropriate material. And so does someone have the right to privacy in terms of their communication and their actions? Does that guardian have a right to confiscate the whole laptop and look at it? Do they have the right to search a room whenever they want?
Safety is a topic.
Hmm.
Safety,
Safety, yes.
there's a fine line between the ward knowing what their safety is and getting themselves into trouble online.
Correct. I mean, all of these rights,
Yeah.
we have to balance the protection with the autonomy. And it can be a very complex and challenging topic because there are so many scenarios and so much nuance. So there has to be a very delicate balance affording individuals autonomy and dignity, and also ensuring that that folks can be safe. Any other comments on the Bill of Rights? All right. So now I'm gonna jump to an area,
Actually, I do.
okay,
It says vote unless restricted by the court. So is the conservator voting for is the guardian voting for the conservator, or how does that work?
I have typically seen, for example, the guardian go along with the ward to vote. Sometimes they may need assistance with that process.
So when the guardian, who is the,
So we're calling them the guardian and the other person will call the ward.
I think he means because your rights there, that's your ward's rights.
right,
Versus
so
guardian.
the person, the guardian, where's their vote?
They vote for themselves,
have their
they do
own.
not vote for you.
If you're voting for a president, you have your own vote. Each person has their own vote.
And if that right's restricted by the court, nobody gets to.
Oh,
And the big thing about this is voting is how we get laws passed and how we make legislature. If an entire group of people, those who are under guardianship, were not allowed to vote, they have no influence on the laws that may impact them. So it is an essential right that Minnesota has determined that individuals under guardianship reserve the right to vote. Unless there are very specific reasons that a judge finds for restricting that right.
Usually some criminal activity in the past.
I have no idea.
I think you would have to do that, because but what else could?
It's murder and stuff. They do it for psych stuff too. though.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with folks who have had it restricted. I'm very familiar with folks who have that right. So the next piece, I'll just make I think we've already covered this, but these are the guardian's duties. To ensure that the person under guardianship, that their needs are met, to use government benefits to meet the needs of the person under guardianship rather than their estate. And what this means is if you are a guardian, you are not required to spend your own money on taking care of the ward of the person under guardianship. You use their own money and their own benefits, but you would not be responsible for their financial well-being, like it's not your responsibility from your bank account. Take reasonable care of the property. And if they have a whole bunch of assets, like if they suddenly come into
Inheritance.
that's the word, then it would be important for the guardian to recognize someone else should probably deal with this because it's a lot of assets. Annually, the guardian has to submit a few forms to the courts and follow through with a few legal requirements. They must submit a personal well-being report to the court every year. And that includes things like very basic health information, height, weight, new medical conditions, but it also includes where they're living, the different parts of like their services and supports. And so that is reviewed annually by the court. The annual notice of right to petition for capacity of restoration. So every single year, it is legally required for the person under guardianship to be served a piece of paper that says you have the right to go to court and ask for guardianship to be ended. And it gives that process as well. The last one is affidavit of service. So the guardian has to submit a letter saying, here are the things that we did. Here are the accounting of the finances. Here are all of the other things that happened with their property or stuff. Any questions on what guardians are legally required to do? We're gonna jump a little bit to
Um,
This one. Guardianship challenges. What makes guardianship and the process of guardianship sometimes controversial, or what are the ways that the rights of the person under guardianship are in conflict with the rights of the guardian? So there is lack of data. We don't necessarily have a singular place nationally where we collect information on guardianships, on how many there are, on who's filing them. So that is a big problem when it comes to actually studying guardianship. People with disabilities are widely, although erroneously, seen as less capable of making autonomous decisions. So that is just the general risk that folks aren't going to get listened to when they have opinions. People with disabilities are often denied due process in guardianship proceedings. So even though it is a right for a person under guardianship to have legal representation and to be part of this process, it doesn't always happen. And the last one is capacity determinations often lack sufficient scientific or evidentiary basis. So when a judge looks at all of the evidence to determine whether someone has the ability to be their own guardian or not, there isn't a standard set of rules or criteria that they use. And sometimes there isn't a lot of evidence provided. And it's a little less formal than, for example, determining your capacity to stand trial. Like there are very specific pieces in that and very specific people who have to do the assessment. In guardianship, that's not quite the case. So those are, I think we have another slide. Guardianship is considered to be protective. That's the intent. The goal is to help people be more safe. But the courts often fail to protect the individual. And this can be related to who is appointed as guardian, that the complaints of a person under guardianship are not taken seriously. Most states require consideration of less restrictive alternatives, but courts and others in the guardianship system often do little to enforce this requirement. And what this means is that in an ideal situation, the person under guardianship would have been offered alternatives such as supportive decision-making, power of attorney, healthcare directives, as a way to maintain their independence. Unfortunately, those options are not always tried first. And so it does remove the ability for an individual to show that they could do it independently. And every state has a process for restoration, which is restoration of capacity, meaning that person is able to make decisions for themselves and maintain their safety. Every state has a process, but the process is not often used. It can be very complex, it can be very confusing, and it can be cost prohibitive because this is a legal process which will require court lawyers. So those are the main big challenges for guardianship. The questions that we have for this listening session, of the challenges listed, which do you feel has the most impact on individuals? And are there any challenges that I did not include on this, in this presentation?
What about the medical care? That would be a difficult one.
Okay. Medical care definitely fits, especially when the person under guardianship and the guardian have different opinions about their care.
Other one is,
Where they're cared for.
Right, where they're cared for, who is their doctor, who, all of these things related to medical care can be challenging.
another one has to do with the monetary or the inheritance.
Okay. So again, do you mean that there might be differences in priorities?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any other thoughts or comments on the challenges related to guardianship? Yes.
I didn't see the ward being able to have an opinion on where they live versus the guardian just telling them they're gonna be somewhere, like a different state where they don't want.
All right.
Was that in there
Yeah,
somewhere?
again, that's kind of what I was getting at is housing and living situation.
Yeah.
And where the right to choose the home they're in or the facility.
So.
Yeah,
Okay,
I was reading them, I didn't find that one anyway.
I think that's all right, but I don't see it up here.
From our experience recently, it's not.
All right,
Cause, yeah, we dealt with that this summer.
and let's see here.
But we also couldn't get straight answers from people,
Right,
so it was very difficult,
it's very messy.
yeah.
All right, so I'm jumping back and forth and I'm sorry. It's not my presentation, so I'm trying to do my best. The determination of incapacity. So the technical definition for the legal system, an individual who, for reasons other than being a minor, is impaired to the extent of lacking sufficient understanding or capacity to make personal decisions, and who is unable to meet personal needs for medical care, nutrition, clothing, shelter, or safety, even with appropriate technological and supported decision-making assistance. There needs to be the existence of a disabling condition. And such conditions cause the inability to adequately manage one's personal finances. So that is what the state uses as their criteria to determine if someone needs guardianship. Knowing the legal standards that the courts are ruling on, how do you feel about the guardianship process or the court's ability to effectively make this rule? So what would happen is the individuals who are petitioning for guardianship would provide the evidence to the court. If the person does not want a guardian, they could provide opposing evidence. But ultimately, it is a judge, not a medical provider, not a, anyone that is familiar with with any specific disability. It is a lawyer, it is a judge that makes the call. How do you feel knowing that that is the way that the court decides these things? Is there something that you would like differently?
Is there a separate court or process that deals with this? Because most of the legal system, the court systems are so overloaded now that they just want to push something through real quick, and they don't make a detailed examination.
I believe that this is civil. And there are specific like departments of the court that do it. But that is a good point.
Because the civil system in many cases is backed up even further than the criminal courts.
And typically what is recommended is that you start this process approximately 6 to 9 months prior to the person turning 18. So that it can be in place by the time the person turns 18. There is a process of emergency guardianship. And emergency guardianship can be done very quickly, but it's time limited. It's limited to 60 days. So if someone, for whatever reason, ends up in a hospital unable to make their decisions, there is a way for a guardian to be involved very, very quickly. But that has to be reviewed within 60 days to determine, do we need to make this permanent or not?
I have a question here based on what you just said. I don't want to get into too much.
That might not be able to answer it.
I'm facing a medical procedure that in all cases has resulted in collateral brain damage. I may need or may not need the guardian. And I may need them permanently. I may need them only for a limited period of time, a few years. How does that fall into some of this? Saying should be done 6 to 9 months before the individual reaches 18. I'm 73.
Right, so that specific statement is because many people choose to enter into the guardianship process when a loved one turns 18. It can be done at different times, but there are some less restrictive alternatives to guardianship. And these are the ones that I think would be applicable to situations like you just mentioned. So less restrictive means of support should be tried, and it should be found ineffective before going to guardianship. One of those options is healthcare proxies. You can write out who you would like to make your decisions if you are unable to make a decision based on a surgery. Advanced directives. That is a very similar, you can appoint a representative in case you are ever found to be incapacitated, or if you're ever found to require a guardian. You can actually put in writing, here's who I want my guardian to be. Now, that doesn't mean they want to be the guardian, but you can put that in your own wishes. And this one comes up a lot in mental health because there are conditions that aren't permanent. They may be temporary. They may require medication or treatment where a person is not able to make decisions for themselves safely. But as soon as the condition is appropriately managed, then they go back to being able to be independent. Supported decision making. This is a newer concept. And to be extremely honest, I am not super well versed in it. It usually involves a panel of people. So you have a team that would work with the person that has difficulty making decisions, and potentially those who care about them. And it's a negotiation of sorts in terms of providing that individual clear information about the risks and alternatives, and making sure that they are aware of what their decision could mean for them in the future. But it is a team. So it is not a fast process. Power of attorney. You can also delegate certain of these rights to another person through a power of attorney. And that, again, it is a very specific legal process. And that can be an alternative to guardianship because it only covers the very small area that needs to be covered. And notarized statements. Yeah, you can notarize, this is what my wish is. This is who will be taking care of this. So those are some of the alternatives to guardianship. And other supports. We'll go here first. There are case management services, in-home services, food prep, direct deposit, medical release forms, person-centered planning, vocational services, supported living services. There's a whole bunch of pieces that can help an individual reach independence without having a guardian. So the question that we can discuss here, this is the last question, and we have about 10 minutes left. What are alternatives to guardianship and or additional supports that you have found effective, if anyone has used them? And what would you like to see as options? So personally, as someone who works in healthcare, in mental health services, that supported decision-making is kind of like a big nebulous thing. It would be great if there were more guidelines on how to access, how to utilize them, and more training for people to be able to do it. That is one of the things that I see as a need. Anyone else? Go ahead.
I was trying to ask her, there's a difference between Wisconsin's guardianship and here. And I can't remember what it is, but I know it's like a partial. Because it's what we were looking for, but it's not available in Minnesota.
Yes, so every state has wildly different rules. Things that would be great is if there was a comprehensive, unified understanding of what guardianship meant. Because it's also incredibly difficult if someone moves. And so it gets very complicated. Like a guardianship passport that you could take places that would help you maintain the same rights that you might have somewhere else. Any services that anyone's used that have been helpful in maintaining independence? that weren't listed or that you guys want to bring up?
What kind of, can it be like educational services or
It could be educational services,
something in learning center?
a learning center. It is really common for folks who are over the age of 18 or 21 to no longer have access to education and learning. And just because they turned 18 or 21 doesn't mean that they are no longer capable of learning. But there aren't a lot of options. And that would be a great one for folks to learn more about either their health or their finances in order to be more independent. I think that it's a great choice. In the back,
Maybe like a higher education grading system, like if a college has a really poor support system, they get a lesser grade, or if they have an ample support system around diversity, they get a better grade.
yeah, that would be cool, not just for education. For group homes, for any service provider, we do it for food service, you get a health score. It would be great for agencies to have something like a health score. And for the last few minutes, any other thoughts about guardianship that you feel are important or that aren't being talked about? Any other ideas?
I do, but it's probably like,
All right, any other, if you can be brief, any other ideas?
I had one. I was thinking about I didn't think of it till you started to talk about supported decision making, but I would think that on the Bill of Rights, there should be a right to information about what decisions are being made about you.
That's the feeling.
Very nice. Yes,
I was thinking about something along the lines of, as it would be cool if there was some service that helped a family decide whether guardianship is the right choice or what alternative would be the right choice for them. So like say for parents whose child is reaching the age of becoming an adult and trying to decide what would be the best.
Would that be something such as the Autism Law Center?
right, you can have consultations with legal services that might give you that, but that is consulting with lawyers.
Right.
That is a cost. That's a process. You're thinking a free access.
Yes.
Where folks can go and get information with no barriers.
They have that. It's at, all the hospitals. But the social workers could do that, but Gillette actually has a specialist.
So Gillette Children's
We
does
still
have a
have them.
specialist. Many of the hospitals do have their own teams that determine if individuals have capacity, either because they need emergency commitment or guardianship. But there isn't an easy access for just anyone. And should this also be part of the education system?
And I'm thinking more along maybe to like a family therapy type thing. setting,
Mediation?
Where there's, like, easy access to a safe space in which everyone in the family can have a conversation about capacity and needs and concerns about safety or, okay.
That's a great idea. Yeah, again, you may be able to access that through a private therapist or something else. But the key is, how do we make it accessible to everyone? Because if everyone doesn't have access, then it may not be as helpful. Any other comments on guardianship or ideas?
It'd be nice if there was an in-between instead of all or nothing.
Yes. An in-between would be great. And again, I do apologize for not being Eric.